that. So yeah, so we will get moving on. Again, before we get too far, please go through and enter your name and your role and what school and district you are from at the roster at that link. We will show it again at the end of the webinar, just so we can keep good track of who's here and how we can better meet your needs going forward. Okay. So again, for those of you that are not familiar, you can, we'll just go through some of these. This is the webinar. We do have it set up as listen-only mode. If you do have questions, it'll probably work out best to answer them in the question pane panel, which will be on your left-hand side. And you can ask questions, and then we can move and we can share them and have question time at the end. So all right, so for today, we do have myself, I'm Dan Seaman, and I also have my colleagues, Jennifer Grenke and Sara Summ. We are all Wisconsin RtI Center Technical Assistance Coordinators, and we are all on the Family Engagement Work Group. So we will be providing this webinar. It is being recorded, so we will be having this available on the Wisconsin RtI Center YouTube page. And what we'll be doing is it'll also be available on the Wisconsin RtI Center page as a resource going forward. All right, so today we want to start looking at how are schools working and engaging with families. So we do have a school that we have Berlin School District that will be sharing some of their actions around partnering with families. But we do know that a lot of schools are doing a lot of really great work on partnering with families, engaging with families. So here we have a whole bunch of different examples on the page. So for example, student performance, looking at home visits, positive phone calls, fundraisers, potlucks, a lot of different things that schools are doing to help and try and establish better engagement with their families. So as you take a look at this list, which strategies do you think has just take some reflection, and what strategies do you think have the most impact on student achievement? And which ones do you think have the least impact? Because ultimately, the reason that schools are trying to engage families is really focusing on improving student achievement. So as we move on, so we really want schools to look at establishing a continuum of partnering with families. So we know that schools will need to continue to do some of those lower impact activities, like setting up those celebrations and potlucks, and helping out with fundraising and attending school performances. But we also ultimately want schools to really focus in on how do we engage and partner with families to provide more higher impact activities? So setting up regular personalized communication with families, modeling learning support strategies for students that may be struggling, setting up monthly or even more often positive phone calls and contacts. Are we setting up opportunities so that families can see themselves and their children and their culture within the school? So we really want to have schools start to recognize that we do need to do more lower impact, and we're really focusing on embracing families, moving to really starting to engage and partner with them, but then move towards empowering them to really take more emphasis and provide more support to their students and helping their students really reach their expectations. So you can see on this graphic, we do have a lot of the activities with a bold box around them. So those activities are strategies that are highlighted in the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction's Promoting Excellence for All strategies around family engagement. So having back to school nights, making those monthly positive phone calls and contacts, providing home visits, modeling support learning strategies, having that regular personalized communication, and feature photos that represent the families within the school. So those are all strategies that the Promoting Excellence for All group has seen as strategies that can help reduce and minimize achievement gaps with students in Wisconsin. So just doing some reflection, when you think about the activities that you're using at your schools to partner with families, start to write down what are all the different activities that you're using to engage families in the past. And what practices are you spending the most time and effort on, in planning on? And then start to think about what practice or practices do your families report would be the most important for them to attend. So when you think about the events and practices that you're spending time on, and then also reflect on what your families feel are the most important to attend, what's the message that your school is sending to families about their role in their child's learning? So with those guiding questions, we want to have you start to look and think about what activities and what components that you would like to really take a look at when you're working on improving family engagement and family partnerships within your school. So when you're taking a look at, in a little bit, Jennifer's going to share some information about the 5 roles that families have, and also start to think about those high impact versus low impact strategies.
Hello, everyone. So I just want to share out some of the roles that parents can play and what is really going to benefit them as they support their children in school. So what you know from your experience is born out of the research that we have, and there's a robust body of research showing that if parents play these 5 roles, their children have better educational outcomes. So if we know what it is parents do that make a difference for kids to succeed, then the roles of schools is to help families be equipped to play these 5 roles. For example, it's important for parents to communicate to their children that they have high expectations and they value education. One really simple way but effective way parents do this is by asking children what they learned in school that day. And many of us ask their children what they've learned, and a lot of times they'll say, oh, nothing, or it's more something at recess or whatever. But if the teacher sends home an email describing specifically what the student studied that day, perhaps something about ancient Rome, then the teacher could also suggest a list of some questions, like ask your child, who is their favorite emperor? Then they can start having a conversation, and the parents are more equipped to help their child learn, and they can also understand that their parents value learning. So if you get information about how your son or daughter did on a quiz or a test, you can be monitoring them and helping and holding your child accountable. But if you don't know that and you don't get any information about homework until the end of the grading period, you really don't have any knowledge or any way or ability to support your child. So in order for a parent or a family to guide their child's education, whoops, in order for them to support their child's education and actually advocate for their children, the families need information and they need support from the teachers. So they need to know what their child is learning and where their child is academically, where their child needs to be, and how they can support their child's learning at home. So just providing ongoing individualized communication that includes information that each family needs to help their child be successful is an essential practice. And just a quick comment, there's a program called Ready K, and it's a really nice activity that schools can participate in, and it's free. And it kind of gives parents information throughout the week. Like Monday they talk about a skill, and then on Wednesday they send a text to the parents to practice the skill, and on Friday they get a reminder. Now this is for early childhood, so like 4K, 5K, but man, this is something that I think schools could be doing and teachers could be doing to support parents' ability to support children's learning. So another thing that we wanted to get at is that research has done the variety of contexts on that 5-to-1 interactions, and this works for parents as well. So if we know there's a child that really struggles in our school and we know that there's going to be negative interactions, we really have to develop those positive interactions to engage those parents so that they can be part of that problem-solving process when it's needed. And it also builds those relationships with parents when they're getting specific feedback on what their child is doing and how well their child is doing. Those positive contacts, you're building relationships with families, and they're more apt to want to be participating with you and to help their child learn. So it's just something that's going to be effective to accelerate children's learning. And the more we equip parents to support learning at home, the better that we're going to see the child's academic outcomes. And sometimes parents need refreshers on how to do certain operations. For example, some schools teach lattice multiplication, but most of our parents didn't learn it that way. So when they try to help their child, it's really frustrating. So maybe there's something that you can do, like a quick mini lesson for parents about lattice multiplication that they can help support their child's learning at home. I mean, you can do this on YouTube videos or even on a video recording of yourself and sending it to parents. And parents' ability to play these roles, we know this is all going to benefit their child, and it's highly dependent upon the information that they receive from their child's teachers. So we really need to think about, as teachers and schools, how we can really start participating and engaging parents and giving them the skills that they need so that they can play their part with their children. Next slide. So where is the gap in your school? Just thinking about that previous slide and those 5 areas that parents can help their children be successful. We as educators need to help bridge gaps. So how do we do this? By building those trusting relationships, embracing families where they're at and celebrate what they bring, just bringing the different cultures that they bring to our building, that ongoing communication, engaging with them in that bidirectional conversations so that it's not just us telling them what to do, but also getting some feedback from them, and then developing those academic partnerships. So empowering parents to have those skills, those strategies to support their children. Like I mentioned, like that program Ready 4K, it's an awesome program that you can look at to just help equip parents with those skills that they need. And I think the next slide we're going into is Berlin, and they're going to share out how they have built these relationships with parents.
All right. Can you guys all see my screen?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, great. Okay, so hi, I'm Carrie McCarthy. I'm the Family and Community Partnership Coordinator here at the Berlin Area School District. I was hired through the School Climate Transformation Grant back in 2014. We're coming up to year 3 of our grant, and hopefully it'll be funded. I just saw they kicked the funding initiative down the road today, so we'll see how that goes. I was really hired to really take a critical eye to how we engage with our families here in the school district and look at it systematically through school climate surveys and other data about families coming into the school, us doing outreach, things like that. And so what I'm going to share with you today is some of the results and some of the belief statements that we have found and how we've kind of combated those, or addressed those within our district. So some basic demographic data. Berlin has about 5,500 citizens here, and we cover a very large area over 3 counties. So it's very spread out, but it's not that big of a school district. We only have about 1,655 students as of today, and we only have 1 elementary, 1 middle, and 1 high school. We also have a couple of parochial schools who feed into our high school as well. So we really try to form some really strong community partnerships because we know that eventually those students will become ours as well when they get to high school, if not before. So we really do a lot of outreach with those schools and their families as well. We have a very high free and reduced lunch population here in Berlin. About 55% of our students are eligible for free and reduced lunch. However, we think that number is probably underreported because of the older students who don't want to identify or fill out the application for free and reduced lunch status. We have about 16% of our students have an identified disability, which is a little higher than the state average. We have about 7% of our students have limited English proficiency, and the number of families with limited English proficiency is actually higher than that. So we have a lot of parents who have difficulty conversing in English. We have 7% of our students are designated as children of migrant workers, and we have about a 30% in and out rate on an average year, and that includes our migrant working families who go to Texas or Mexico or California for part of the year and then come back at the end of the year. So they're here for a couple of months in the beginning of the year, and then they leave and come back around this time every school year. And then we have about 3% of our students designated as homeless according to the McKinney-Vento law, and that number has actually grown dramatically over the past few years. We had about 10 years ago, I think we had about 2 students who were designated as homeless, and currently we're between 50 and 60 students who are homeless or housing insecure according to McKinney-Vento. So that's been a real challenge for us to work with families who are housing insecure or who don't have homes. Our racial makeup here in Berlin is pretty white, as you can see. However, we do have a large and ever-growing Hispanic population. Our families, as I said earlier, we have a good chunk of families speak Spanish as their first language, and we have a couple of families from East Asia who are also English language learners we are working with as well. Just in terms of like our PBIS success over the past few years, Clay Lamberton started out in about 2010, 2011, and they reached fidelity in Tier 1 in 2012. Berlin Middle School had reached it in 2015. Clay got to Tier 2 in 2015, and Clay's now begun their RAP services and other Tier 3 supports for students as of this past school year, as has the middle school. They've really kind of picked it up. And what's really important there is, because it's such a Tier 3 and especially RAP specifically is so family focused, that we really wanted to make sure that we had strong family engagement strategies at all tiers, so it wasn't like we're never going to talk to the parents until the student is in crisis or something like that and needs Tier 3 services. We want to make sure that that constant ongoing communication and engagement is embedded throughout the tiers as students need different levels of service. So the why, how we came to where we are today. In doing a number of interviews with staff, we came across some of these very strongly long-held beliefs. Berlin is an extremely old community. It's been around for about 165 years. There's a lot of families who've been here for generations. It's a very tight-knit community, and so statements such as students can't achieve because they came from that family. Maybe there was intergenerational poverty. Maybe there was, some criminal activity that happened in the past. That was something that we used to hear a lot around here. I don't know if anyone else hears that in their school district, but that was kind of a troubling belief for me to kind of address. The other thing that some of the teachers said when I first came on was, if only parents would create and enforce the rules at home, students would be more successful at school. And we know that we have them for 7 hours a day here, and we really should be the leaders while they're here, and that parents do the best with what they can. And so we can't always attribute success at home to success at school. That's not always a one-to-one thing. The other thing that we often heard was nobody comes to those parent nights, and that kind of speaks to the embrace, engage, empower slide that we were talking about earlier, because the people who come to the parent nights aren't the ones that need the information. That was something that we heard a lot from school personnel. They wanted to give parent education. And a lot of times parents might have been disengaged from school even when they were in school. They didn't really feel a strong connection to the school, and so when they have their children here, they don't really weren't necessarily feeling comfortable, or weren't necessarily feeling welcome. So we wanted to address that as well. And then this constant one, Johnny has missed 15 assignments and you need to help him get the work done. Like those kind of comments from teachers speaking to parents. And I'll talk about how we address these in a little bit. And then teachers were emailing about student behavior to parents on a regular basis, and they were kind of concerned about having any parent confrontations, despite the fact that not very many parents of our students here actually check email on a regular basis, so they weren't even getting the information. And so we really wanted to foster that voice communication when there was something that needed to be addressed. And then another thing that was a really big challenge was teachers were assigning homework using Chromebooks, only to find out that not that many of our parents actually had access to Wi-Fi at home, so the homework was unable to be completed. Some of our placement decisions for at-risk students were being made without parental collaboration. The parents didn't really feel like they were partners in the decision about placement for their child who might have been labeled at risk. And so that was a troubling thing. And then parent communications were often sent home only in English, despite the large number of non-English speaking parents. So I'll talk a little bit about how we addressed some of those long-held beliefs in a bit here. And how we did that was we created the family engagement protocol. And I know you probably can't see it on the screen of my presentation here, but I've attached it as an attachment on the webinar. So if you go to the right-hand side, you'll see it in there.
Yep.
basically, did everybody see it? Okay, good. So basically we have 11 value statements because we wanted to make sure that our entire staff, and when I say we, I mean the administrative team, wants to make sure that whenever these kind of statements that are not really factual come up or problematic, that we have a standard base of values that our administrative staff and others can reflect back on. That's not how we think about families in the district, kind of so we can challenge those long-held beliefs and really try to change mindset about families and how important they are to achievement within our schools. So the first part of the protocol is that all students can and want to learn, and that really has to do with what we do as a school district in order to be able to help that occur. So we invest in professional development to provide high quality instruction delivered through highly engaging teaching strategies. So that's just good practice. So we included that as number one. Number two was that all families want their children to succeed. We really wanted teachers, paraprofessionals, our custodians, everyone in the district to really understand that that statement is so important, that all families want the best for their children. They want them to be very good at school. They just might not understand how to help. And so how we've changed our practices is we help parents recognize and leverage their child's strengths first, before, and while addressing areas for student growth. So that looks like in practice when we have a student success meeting about little Johnny who is struggling in math or with behavior, we always go around the table and we talk about, okay, what is Johnny really good at? What are things that he's really doing well at school, so that parents feel welcomed and they don't feel like they're put kind of on the offensive as the very first thing when they sit down, and then we can really problem solve using those child strengths. So maybe Johnny's a really good communicator and we can talk about, all right, how can we leverage that communication strength in order for him to be successful here at school? In terms of number three, our students are more likely to succeed when their families feel connected to school, so we place a high value on authentic family engagement. And so we have really what we consider the three pillars of family engagement within our district, which is multimodal communication, meaning we communicate with parents via phone, via email, on the web, in person. We understand that we looked at some research that showed that you really have to communicate with people in 5 different ways in order to be able to get some sort of response. So we really try to push those messages out there in ways that are going to develop the most response from parents and really engage them. We also partner with families when decision making about their child. We understand that they are the experts on their child and that they are experts at the table. Just because they may or may not have letters behind their names means that they're experts on their child and their family, and their voice at the table is really important. And then advocacy. We really encourage our parents to be their child's best advocate, and that speaks to like number 11 down here at the end. And number 4, some families may not understand how the systems of school work. So we spent a lot of time and resources just streamlining how kids or how families register their child for school. We actually, this might seem counterintuitive, but we actually went from a paper registration system to an online registration, and you're thinking to yourself, well, if only 10% of your families have Wi-Fi or whatever, how are they doing that? It actually was a great way to collect very comprehensive information about our family in terms of health history, in terms of contacts, and then we actually have family registration drives at our school, and we also go out and do home visits for families who just cannot make it into school or don't feel comfortable coming to school. And that is a great way to get at their families who are very kind of disengaged from school, to do that outreach with them in a way that's non-threatening. It's very easy, and it's amazing how welcoming families are when you come to their house and register, and then we can answer all kinds of questions in person, like about how do I report my child's absences, or how do I find out what the days of school are off, or, my child has this health issue, how do I get them resources that are needed? Or we have an IEP from our former school, how does that work? So I'm able to go out with, and that works out very well with a lot of our migrant families. I work with our school translator and migrant liaison, and we go out to houses all throughout July and August and early September to help get those families registered, or anyone else who really needs help and can't make it into school. And it's just a great way to have a bond. Our families are consumers, and they have a choice as to where they send their kids to school. This just really speaks to the fact that we want to treat our families like customers, because that's exactly what they are, consumers. And therefore we should treat them with the utmost respect and unconditional care. It was just kind of a way to really get teachers to understand, in addition to achievement for the student, why family engagement is so important. I mean, it's kind of strange, but essentially the people who send their kids here pay our salaries, and so we really want to have good customer service whenever we're dealing with them, from the people who are at the front desk welcoming them, from the very first interaction that they have with students and families, to the person collecting the lunch money, to the custodians. Everyone needs to have this sort of customer-based belief about their families that we work with. Labeling using fixed mindset or deficit-based language and referring to students and their families is shown to alienate students and their families from school. This was kind of a big deal for a long time, and it was hard for people to really grapple with this concept of, oh, he's an ADHD kid, or he's just going to be an at-risk kid. We really don't want to think about our students or families that way, because it does separate our families. We want to, once again, look at our families and students in a strengths-based language and look at the services they're receiving. It's not a fixed mindset thing, but maybe as a way to help them get resources and what they may need in school to be successful. Many of our families feel more comfortable speaking and reading in languages other than English, so that was a big deal. Our translator and our ELL teacher, and we actually were very fortunate to be able to hire 2 paraprofessionals who speak Spanish, and so between the 4 of them, they translate most of our communications. The one thing we have not been able to really be super successful on is our website. Part of it's translated, but the translation hasn't been super successful because Google does it. So I think parents get the gist, but that's something we're trying to work on so that it can be translated more successfully. We also have invested in a bunch of signage so that we have a very large elementary school. It's very spread out. It spans about, I think, 4 city blocks if you walk one end to the other, and it can be a little confusing. So we have invested in a lot of signage, especially there, so that parents can find where they're going, because that is often their child's first experience with school, and we want them to feel welcome there. We've done it at the middle and high school as well, but things there are just a little easier to find. And families are their child's first teacher, but that doesn't mean they're experts in BISD's academic content. We really strongly believe that our teaching should be done by our licensed teachers. I know that I'm a parent in the school district as well. I have 3 children, and I already have a 6th grade daughter, and I can't do her math. I can't help her. I did Google how to do long division the other day. And so we really want to be mindful that our parents might not be best teachers in our academic content. So it's great if our parents can help and work on different strategies with their children in terms of homework and learning, but really that should be done by the professionals here at school. Ways parents support their children, and these are the ways that we ask parents to support their academic skills with their children, is to read with them whenever possible and in their native language. So we hand out a lot of Spanish language books to our families who are English language learners, so that they're able to read in their native language. We also have, I don't know if anybody has used bedtime math, but we encourage families to do a bedtime math thing, which is fairly easy. It's It's on the web. It can be on your smartphone as well. There's an app there, and it's like one little math program. That's at the elementary level. And then at the middle and high school, we really use block scheduling so that kids have enough time during the school day to be able to get their homework done and to be able to access that high quality teaching expertise, as opposed to setting up a lot of power struggles at home over doing homework and missing out on that enriching family time at home, because we really do think that that is really important for creating successful adults, is that we can have positive relationships between children and adults, and then those social emotional skills are taught over things like dinner or time together. Number 9, and I kind of spoke to this already, not all families feel comfortable coming to school, have the time to come to school, or available during our traditional school hours. This is a big deal, especially we have a lot of shift workers here who are parents or guardians, and so they'll often work second shift or third shift, and so coming in during the school day is problematic for them, or families don't have time off of work. They don't work a state. Even if they work first shift, they may not be able to get out of school. So we really have flexible programming schedules. If we do family nights, they're usually in 2-hour blocks so that parents can come when they're available. And when we schedule student success team meetings or RAP team meetings, it's always family driven, so we do it around their schedule. And our staff has been allowed through the administration to have some flexible time, so that if they do have to work at 7 o'clock at night to have a student success team meeting, they'll be able to accumulate some comp time later on. Some families enjoy coming to school to volunteer and observe their students learning. This was a big deal originally. They were very concerned that we were just going to allow everybody to come in whenever, and the teachers didn't necessarily feel very comfortable with that. So we took some feedback there, and we changed how family members are welcomed into our building, because we really do want them all to come and see what's going on in the school and experience our wonderful learning environments and see their child interacting with other students and meet other parents so that they can form a community within the school. We also put up a bulletin board every year before our family night that really encourages multiculturalism and diversity, and we have all the students in Clay Lamberton Elementary School, for example, they put up a picture of their family, whatever that family may look like. So when parents do come in for a family night, they see themselves in pictures throughout the school, which is a really, I think it can be really impactful, and kids really get very excited when they get to show off their family picture when their parents come in. And then finally, parents are their child's lifelong advocate. We really do feel strongly about this piece. We strive to do more talking or listening than talking in all parent meetings. It's our protocol that we let parents speak first, and we always talk about strengths first, so that we open that dialogue with something positive, and we really can help to, work on some challenging topics, but in a positive, collaborative way with families. We also have worked a lot on our transitions between buildings. There was not really a big kindergarten roundup when kids went from 4K to 5K. There wasn't a middle school orientation night. There wasn't a high school orientation night, so to speak, or it wasn't very well attended, I should say. And we've really worked to boost those events, and there are many of them now. So parents can get the information that they need. We also try to combine those with some sort of child-centered play, like if there's a play or a musical or something like that. So, because parents generally tend to show up when they see when they want to see their child perform. So we kind of put those things together so that they're able to do that. So that's kind of our family engagement protocol. It's a work in progress. I wish I could say that everyone in the school district has completely 100% bought into our belief statements, but and it's just going to be an ongoing thing of challenging these mindset things, because these mindsets weren't created overnight, and this protocol is not going to change those mindsets overnight, but we hope that it's at least a starting point. So this is why we're doing those. We're using those belief statements to address non-family centered stereotypes at all levels. We're trying to clearly delineate staff behaviors in dealing with families. You know, a lot of the PBIS research says that teachers really need to know exactly what their actions need to be in order for it to have long-lasting change. So we wanted to be very specific in terms of the therefores on the right-hand side so that they knew exactly what they were supposed to be doing. At the middle school, for example, all staff must call home with a positive comment about a child prior to calling home for a negative reason. So every trimester at the middle school, we get phone calls home from the child's new teacher or whatever, and it has to be a meaningful positive comment. It can't be, I really like Jimmy's shoes today. It has to be a very strengths-based, and that's been hard, I think, for some of our most challenging students, for teachers to really get their head around what that child's strengths are. And then we also use these belief statements to become inclusive. So we're really, you know, just trying to, like I said, engage and embrace families so that they feel empowered to make a change and that feel that they really belong here in our school. I talked about this a little bit in terms of the authentic family engagement. That whole family voice and choice. We really try to ask families about their needed resources on an individual basis. And I know I've gone to several conferences and several people have mentioned that this is a problem. You know, the people who we need to go to, this is what I hear on a regular basis, the people who need to go to this don't come, or we don't get a very good turnout and we have to bribe them to get there. So we really try to insert parent education into a time when students and families would naturally be at school, as I said. So when there's a play or a musical production or a classroom party, we can insert little pieces of parent education in there. But also we try to be more customized in what parents need and ask them what they need as opposed to just assuming that, oh, you know, they need positive parenting training or something like that. And we really have been trying to change that idea that parents probably would like to attend, but maybe language barriers, prior experience with school, lack of time, or just plain lack of interest is preventing them from coming through the doors. And so those one-on-one home visits, and I know that not everybody has that ability to do that, and we've been very blessed with our translator and for me to have time to be able to go to the people who need help and to be able to have people come to the school through these different registration drives, but I know not everyone has that opportunity. And then we reach out to individual families with volunteer opportunities. So we make sure to have multiple low-risk opportunities delivered in the family's preferred language. So this is kind of interesting, but when I first came on, one of the registration questions on the online registration is, would you like to volunteer at your child's school? And we were finding that families who didn't speak English kept saying, oh no, I can't volunteer because I don't speak English. And so I changed my delivery about that a little bit, and I said instead of volunteering, I would say, would you be willing to bring a dish to pass in for a family, for a teacher appreciation week or a school party? Or I would give them actual concrete ideas as to ways that they could volunteer that were very low risk. It didn't require them even to come to the building. We could even come and pick up the food from them or whatever. And it's amazing. We've really had kind of a spike in volunteerism from some of our families who we were really never able to engage or have participated in school before. So that has worked out very well, is to be very specific in terms of what you need as opposed to just asking generally, would you like to volunteer? Because everybody's brain goes immediately to, oh, I have to be on the PTO and I have to, you know, lead a meeting or something like that, and that's not what we're necessarily looking for. We're just really looking for families to be able to feel comfortable in school and to be able to have a place here. So the current challenges and growth, like I said, it's an ongoing effort to keep the family at the center of all discussions and make sure that that language about the family is very positive. So we're constantly using this engagement protocol to challenge belief statements. Also sustainability of our efforts as new staff are hired and grant funding goes away. You know, when people come in with a new set of beliefs from wherever they worked before, we have to make sure that we completely indoctrinate them into what we have here at Berlin Area School District, and so that's a constant struggle. We have not a lot of turnover, but this year especially it seems like we've had a lot of new staff come on board. And then just generally changing staff attitudes is an ongoing effort. Like I said before, we at least have a way to not combat it, but address it when teachers or staff make non-family friendly statements or belief statements or whatever. We can have something to reflect back on, but it is an ongoing effort. And we really encourage all staff members to accept their role in family engagement. So as I said before, from everyone from the front desk, the nurse, the custodian, the lunch servers, everyone needs to accept their role in making families feel warm and welcome here. And that's kind of it. Do you guys have any questions or?
Thank you so much for sharing all of your information. What I'd like to say to any of the participants, just for time's sake, if you do have any questions, if you could possibly even just put them into the chat box. And Carrie, I'm wondering then if we could just maybe gather who has what questions and possibly even just get back via email if
Sounds
that
perfect.
Do that. Excellent.
Thanks.
Thank you so very much. It was great to hear what all of the hard work that you've put into engaging families in Berlin. I'm Sara Summ. I am a technical assistance coordinator with the RtI Center, as Dan introduced earlier. I'm just going to quickly talk about using our self-assessments as a way to, as part of your continuous improvement process, but really if you're looking at specifically being intentional about how to better engage your families within the school, you may want to take a look at using some of our self-assessments as a way to be able to do that. And I'm just going to quickly talk about it again because of the time, but we have 3 different self-assessments. We have the BOQ, Benchmarks of Quality, the TFI, Tiered Fidelity of Implementation. Both of those assessments are geared for your PBIS implementation. And then lastly, we have the SIR, which is the School-Wide Implementation Review. What I really just want to talk about are just some overall strengths and areas of improvement that I want you to think about as they can be measured by these specific line items. So when we take a look first at that BOQ line item, something that you want to think about, it's just making sure that you know how important it is to have processes in place, those systematic processes in place for how you're going to share out your school-wide PBIS expectations, and that you have plans in that for how you're going to be involving the family and the community. So just being clear and explicit with families regarding expectations, both school-wide and in classrooms. And if you're thinking, how does that look at home? Families could be creating some home matrices, being aware of the expectations within the school matrices, as well as even communicating some of that with like your local library or your school CLC, and just making sure that there's some consistency and bringing in other people as you are involving them in the development of those tools. When we talk next about the TFI, or that tiered fidelity inventory for PBIS, there's just some line items as you can see on the screen, but one thing we really want to be intentional about is who makes up the teams within our school. And those are those decision-making teams who do have a pulse on what's occurring in the school and create policies or practices to address some of those needs. So really just thinking about what's the process for gathering input from the families. Is that two-way communication, so really making sure that you may be giving surveys out to parents, but then in turn taking those surveys, analyzing that data, and using that data to continue to make improvements into the school. When we also think about including people on teams, making sure that we have a similar demographical representation of the student population. So for example, if you have 20% of your student population are Native American students, and you have 5 parents who are serving on a team, we would strongly suggest that one of those parents should also be a Native American, so that we want to make sure that we are getting perspectives from the diverse populations and the cultures that our schools serve. So making sure that everyone has a voice. When taking a look at the SIR, which is the school-wide implementation review, there's a few different line items that really help you address family engagement. So really, in a nutshell, making sure that you have formal, systematic strategies to share benchmarks, to share screening results, and then also to share student progress, just overall general student progress, as well as really importantly sharing the progress of students who are receiving additional supports, whether that's below level or above level, but making sure again that you have that systematic process in place and that you're also doing it proactively, that we're not waiting until there's a need. The parents are aware of the systematic processes that are in place to support all of the kids. And lastly, again, how do we engage parents in the problem-solving process for students who are receiving additional supports? And I think that our school example, Berlin, had touched on some really important things, that the parents are often the experts of their children, and how do we bring them into that process so we can ensure that what we are doing is best for the children that we are serving. So the last slide that I had was just for you, if you want to think about this, and feel free to put it into the chat box, maybe one strength of your system and one area that you think that your system could be improving on as we move into Jennifer's last segment of the webinar.
So just quickly, this is our website, and I talked about if you go to Start Here, you can walk through the process of how to develop an action plan. There are resources in the table below. We've listed the link so you can go to that website and be able to go through our family engagement resources as well as a process for developing an action plan. And then on this next slide, I'm sorry, there you go. This is the Flamboyant Foundation Family Engagement Assessment Rubric, and this is a great way for you to be able to assess where are our staff currently at. You can do a survey, but you can also look at the statements that are listed under each stage and in each row to determine where your staff are at. So, and that is one of the handouts that we've included today. And then finally, as you move forward, as a result of these webinars, we just would like to know, what are your next steps? What are celebrations that have occurred? Maybe what work still needs to be done? What can we do to support your efforts? So please feel free to go ahead and send emails to either Dan, Sarah, or myself. And then we also want you to be watching in your inbox for an evaluation later this week. And there's actually the link to that eval right there. Again, thank you for attending, and I apologize for that glitch at the end here where my sound wasn't working. Thank you, everyone. Bye.